Hey my lovelies, welcome to another true crime and makeup series. I look a little dead because I'm a little sick. I have some situations with my skin going on. I pulled my muscle. I burned my hand yesterday. It's a lot of situations going on today, so ignore my face today. Do let me know if you guys want me to do makeup while I'm doing these stories, or do you guys just want me to do these stories alone and makeup in some other videos. Leave the comments down below in the comment sections, and do remember to like and subscribe. That was weird. Well, getting back to the story. Today's true crime story is about Tim McLean, who was murdered on the way back home, and he was 22 years old when he got stabbed, beheaded, and cannibalized on while going back home to his loved ones. Tim and his friend Tiffany decided that they were gonna one day pack their bags and go off for summer for a week or two to, enjoy, take a break from their normal lives like any other young kid would be like. I am pretty young still, but I am still thinking about taking vacations for the summer because, living your normal life every day can be stressful. And taking a break for a week or two is a great idea if you want to, relieve your stress from the everyday hassle that you have. But Tim and Tiffany did not have any plan. They did not know where they were going and what they were gonna do. They just went where their heart took them. As I was saying, Tim and Tiffany packed their bags up. They were going anywhere where their heart took them. And along the way, they found a traveling carnival. So both of them decided that they're gonna join this carnival and, travel along with the carnival. Mentioned by Tim's father, Tim was a very happy guy who would rarely get angry or mad at anyone. He had a lot of friends, and all his friends and his parents said that he was like the life of the party. By this, you can already tell that he was just a very jolly person. Now knowing Tim's nature, you know that he must have been very excited to join this carnival and work there, travel along with it. He was very excited, and carnivals are very jolly, and he was jolly, so they go both hand in hand. Tim and Tiffany loved the whole environment at the carnival. They were enjoying being in the public eye. They were enjoying making new friends at the carnival. They were partying after work, drinking, just a normal, very happy life for them. It was stress-free. So they both decided that they were going to stay at the carnival, work there, travel along with it for a year. After working at the carnival for a year, Tim decided that he was going to finally move back home, find his life partner, buy a house, have children, settle in, and he was just ready to, quit the job at the carnival and just move back home with his family. In July 2008 was when he finally decided that it was time to move because the carnival was moving, and by this time he was pretty far away from home and he did not want it to go more further away from his house or where he lived before. So July 2008 was the time for him to just quit and just go back home, and he was 22 years old at that time. As I said before, he was already very far away from his home, and it would take him quite a long time to get back home. It would take him 24 hours on a bus to get back home and 2 hours on a plane to, go back home. And he was working at a carnival, and by normal knowledge, carnivals would not have pretty high payments for their employees. They weren't getting much payment, so he could not afford the plane ticket back home for the 2 hours flight. Tim's friends were kind enough to offer to pay a little bit money for him to afford a plane ticket back home. But as I said before, Tim was okay with literally anything, so he did not mind the plane. He did not mind taking the 24-hour bus back home. So at the end, he was taking the 24-hour bus back home.
So I apologize if I'm looking at my notepad because there's a lot of cities and stops and timelines in this case, so I cannot remember all of them at once, so I have to look at my notepad to be perfectly correct.
So on 30 July 2008 at 12:01 p.m., Tim McLean took the 1107 Greyhound bus back home from Alberta to Manitoba. And if I'm pronouncing the cities' names wrong, I apologize because I suck at pronouncing the names of anything. People, cities, buses, whatever. I suck at pronouncing stuff. So Tim McLean departed from Edmonton on the Greyhound bus 1170, not 1107 I said before, to Winnipeg. I apologize again, I'm pronouncing the name wrong, via the Yellowhead Highway. Tim sat at the back of the bus, almost close to the toilets at the back. So this bus had a lot of bus stops before it came to its one of the last stops at 6:55 in Erickson, Manitoba. That's when things began to get crazy. And at this time, Tim was on the bus for 17 hours straight. So why it got crazy, you may ask? It's because there was one passenger who got on and he was quite suspicious looking. He was described as a tall man in his 40s and he was wearing sunglasses and he was bald. So this suspicious looking passenger, when he got on the bus, he sat near the front of the bus. And when the bus stopped on its next rest stop, the suspicious looking passenger got up and was walking to the back of the bus when he saw Tim sitting near the back, and he decided that he was going to sit next to Tim. Even though there was a bunch of seats still empty, he suspiciously sat next to Tim McLean. Tim did not think anything of this weird guy deciding to sit next to him. He just looked at him and just nodded. He had his headphones on and he just went back to sleep with his head on the window. So the people sitting next to Tim McLean and the suspicious guy started noticing that the suspicious guy started acting a bit weird. He started moving back and forth, and he started chanting something in a different language, which the people sitting next to them did not understand, but it was quite weird. To add on to his weird behaviors, it was quite dark at this time, and that suspicious guy was still wearing his sunglasses. So it was kind of giving very red signals to the people sitting next to them. It was, as I mentioned before, it was quite dark already. The bus lights were off because it was quite late already, and the bus driver wanted the people to maybe sleep a little because the journey was quite long. It was a 24-hour journey, and I would be sleeping as well, and I would want the lights to be off. So it was quite dark, and the only source of light was the small TV screens on the seats. After 20 minutes of that guy moving back and forth, chanting something while wearing his sunglasses, creeping the other people sitting next to him, he took out a knife from his bag and he started stabbing Tim McLean, crazily stabbing Tim McLean. He was stabbing Tim McLean in the neck and the chest, and when the people next to him saw him going ham on Tim McLean, they started jumping up, started shouting. There were people throwing up and they were screaming for the bus driver to stop the bus because somebody was getting killed and stabbed. As I mentioned, the people were going crazy. They were panicking to the top of this world anyone could ever imagine, because obviously you never know if that person who's stabbing the other person would go crazy and start stabbing other people. If I was on that bus, I would be panicking as well for my life, because you never know if that person who was stabbing Tim McLean would start stabbing other people as well. So people were panicking to the top level. They were like asking the bus driver to stop the bus so they could get off. But mind you, this bus was on the highway, and you know, highways are pretty busy and the cars are in full speed. You cannot stop the bus in the middle of the highway, and it took a while for the bus driver to stop the car. At this point, Tim McLean woke up and he was screaming bloody hell. He was screaming so much that the other persons who saw him screaming and heard him screaming said that these screams were the most disturbing screams they ever heard. Quickly, everybody got off, and the only one on the bus was the attacker and Tim McLean. The bus driver got off, locked the immobilizer, I think that's what it's called, is basically locking the car so nobody can drive it. He locked the car, he locked the door of the car so the attacker could not come out and attack somebody else. So everybody outside, the passengers, the driver was panicking, and it was just a mess. People still throwing up. As I mentioned, people outside, the passengers and the drivers, were panicking, still throwing up. And on the road, there were cars and trucks passing by. So one of the trucks saw the whole scenario of people, and a bus stopped on the side, and they were looking quite distressed. So the bus driver rolled his window down and asked the passengers if everything was okay and if they needed help. And obviously they said that they needed help. So the truck driver stopped his truck near the bus, and he got off with a crowbar and a hammer to see what was going on, because the whole situation was looking scary. It was not a normal scene. The truck driver took the weapons that he got and took the driver of the bus and another male passenger in the bus to confront the attacker. But when they got in, they went in and they were shocked, because at this point they believed that it was over 100 times that Tim was stabbed. And even if they went up to Tim and the attacker and tried to save him, there was no point, because somebody else could have gotten hurt in the process of confronting the attacker, and it was better for them to not confront him. And even if they did save Tim McLean, he would have, bled out and died before the ambulance or some help could get to them, because they were on a highway. While the bus driver and the truck driver and the passenger were standing looking at this guy attacking Tim McLean, the attacker looked up at the three people who came to confront him, and they said that the attacker's facial expressions were so blank, he had no expressions and no feelings for Tim McLean. So as I mentioned before, the attacker did look at three people standing there, but he did not do anything. He just looked at them for a few seconds and began beheading Tim now. And the three people standing there were still frozen in shock. How this guy is so expressionless, emotionless, and he's just now started to behead this poor guy that he attacked for no reason at all. So now, as the three people were still standing there in shock, and the attacker had beheaded Tim McLean was already dead, so they had nothing they could do now to save Tim McLean. But now that the attacker beheaded Tim, he held Tim's head and started walking towards the three people standing in front to confront him. And obviously the three people who were standing there were now rushing to get out of the bus, because they wanted to save them and the people outside, because now this person was holding a knife in his other hand, holding a severed head in his one hand, walking towards them, and he could do anything. He could attack them, he could attack some passengers outside. So they went out, locked the bus again, and they just called the police. So they did call the police, but because they were on a highway, the help did take a while to come. The attack started at around 8:20 p.m. and the police arrived at around 9 p.m. But so when the passengers locked the door behind the attacker, holding the head of Tim and holding a knife in his other, the attacker then went up to the door that was locked. He held Tim's head and showed it to the passenger standing outside, and went back and started pacing back and forth in the hallway of the bus with Tim's head in his hand and the knife. The police did arrive on the scene, but they did not do anything, because they mentioned that they were calling in more forces to deal with this scenario, like SWAT teams, I guess. And they were just standing outside and just looking at this dude holding Tim's head and walking back and forth. So while the police and the passengers who were waiting outside, looking at the attacker walking back and forth for more forces to come, the attacker then went back to Tim's body, and he began cutting off pieces off of Tim's body and started eating them. And this whole scenario took about 4 hours. Now the police and the SWAT teams arrived on the scene, but they were still not doing anything because they were waiting for this guy to control his rage or whatever his mental issues that he's having right now, because they did not wanted him to, attack them, and at the end they would have to shoot him and, kill him, because they did not want to do that, and they wanted to, capture him alive. After some time, the police and the forces arrived. They took the passengers to the police station to investigate the whole situation that happened in the bus. At one point, the attacker did try to drive away with the bus, but because luckily the driver did lock the bus, he could not drive it away. After 5 hours of the forces waiting outside, it was now 1:30 a.m. in the morning, and the attacker did try to escape. He tried to break the back door or the window to run away and escape this whole scenario, but before he could run away, the police shot 2 shots of tasers to the attacker, and he fell, and they just handcuffed him, put him in the police car. The attacker got caught and he was taken to the police station. The forensic team was on the scene, and when they entered the bus, there was pieces of Tim everywhere. Little bits and pieces of Tim everywhere in the bus. And it was a crazy scene. The next day, this whole story was a big news on every news channel. Tim's body was in such bad condition that the police and the forensic team were taking a while to identify who this person was who got attacked by this attacker. So the next day, as this news was literally everywhere on the channels, Tim's mom, when she got off for work, she saw this news, but because they weren't sure who this person was, Tim's mom did not know that it was her son who got murdered. So she, as normally as she would do, she went to work. Tim's mom worked as a chef at this elderly house, and at this elderly house, they were playing this news all day, and they even did a prayer for this person who died and their family, because it was just horrific thing that happened to anyone. And even though she wasn't sure that this was her son, she still had a bad feeling in her gut, because she knew her son was coming from the same highway or the same kind of bus, and she had a little bit of bad feeling, but because nobody would ever want to think bad about their loved ones, so she didn't think anything of it, and she thought that her son was okay. So at 7:30 p.m., Tim's father went out to get some favorite foods that his son liked for dinner, because Tim was expected to come back for dinner. When he came back home, he saw that Tim's friends were waiting outside for the parents to come home, and he got a little worried. So Tim's friends took Tim's father inside the house, and they sat him down, and they told him that it was his son who was on the bus and got attacked and murdered on the bus. And it is so sad for me to know that Tim's father was holding Tim's favorite food, and they were planning to eat it together at the dinner table, but Tim didn't make it home. Your loved ones can never imagine. You could never imagine what would ever happen to your loved ones when they get out of the house, and if they would ever come back the same way they went out. And I did lose someone in my life, but I can still never imagine what went through Tim's parents' minds and hearts. It is just too heartbreaking. At the police station, the attacker was identified as Vincent Lee, and he was 41 years old, and he was working 3 jobs when he did this. The police asked Vincent to remove his clothes for investigation purposes, and when they did, they found Tim's ear, nose, and tongue in his pockets, which is it's just so bizarre. After fully investigating Tim's body, it was found that Tim's eyes and part of his heart was missing, along with some other body parts that the attacker was cutting while the police were waiting outside, and it was believed that he also consumed the heart and the eyes. Going on to the attacker Vincent Lee's story and what he did before he attacked Tim. So Vincent took the same bus 24 hours before Tim took his bus, but he got off in Erickson for some reasons we are not even sure about. even though he paid full ticket for the 24-hour bus he took before Tim. So as I mentioned before, he took a 24-hour bus before Tim took his bus 24 hours after. He got off in Erickson on 29 July 2008 at 6 p.m. in Erickson, and he got off with all of his luggage. Vincent spent his night on a bench next to a grocery store with all his stuff. And according to a witness, at 3 a.m. in the morning, he saw Vincent sitting on the bench with his eyes wide open. And I can imagine it was a weird encounter to imagine somebody at 3 a.m. sitting on a bench at night alone with all of his stuff and just with blank expressions and eyes wide open. Next morning, July 30, he was still on the bench and he decided that he was going to sell his laptop, his new laptop, to a 15-year-old for $60. That's what he was doing before he got on the bus 24 hours after and attacked Tim. Another witness said when he was stabbing Tim, he was shocked by looking at Vincent's expressions because there was no rage in him. He was like a robot stabbing Tim. When Vincent was presented in court for his trial, the only words he said was, "Someone please kill him." So let's get on to the trial in court. Vincent pleaded not criminally responsible for this attack because he said he was insane or he had some sort of mental problems. And the psychiatrist said that Vincent, while performing his survey if he was crazy or not, he said that Vincent said that he heard God's voice in his mind who told him that Tim McLean was evil and that Vincent had to kill him. At the end, Vincent Lee did not get any jail time. He was sent to a mental health care facility and he was released after 5th May 2015. So if he's alive now, he's free and living his life when he took someone else's. And I don't know what to think about this. He could have, if he's not crazy, he could have been the smartest person ever to pull this trigger off that he was crazy to, escape this charges of him being in jail. And I don't know what to think of this situation. What do you guys think? Did the attacker get it easy? Or I don't know what to think of